sorry. How do we get those priests that we know who stand with a like mind as yourself to begin to talk about this in a more open fashion? Because it seems to me that those that are supporters are in this sense of silence, and we need to get them to be speaking out like you are.
I don't know. I've written, I took a lot of time, a lot of stamps, but I sent a letter. I remember the letter that I sent to the Vatican. Then I felt compelled to write a letter to every member of the Maryknoll community in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the U.S. And I just sent them all a copy, a more personal letter, one-pager, as a member of the community, and bringing up the issue of conscience and, this issue, how can we reject God's call of women? And it was discouraging because I didn't get many responses back. Some did, longtime friends, but others. And then the little booklet that's available here that's kind of hot off the press, I sent that, hundreds of copies out also, wanting to build. And I realized there are no shortcuts. But what has been very discouraging for me, though, in a way, was to hear many women in the movement who are, called to the priesthood and are ordained or preparing for ordination, who want to meet with their local priest and the local bishop, and how discouraging it has been for them through letters, reaching out. Let's talk, let's dialogue. I want to tell you about my call, and that I too have a great love for our church, but how they never get a response back. There's no phone call returned, letter answered, email answered, and it's nothing. And that, now one other thing though, I think we have to, and I keep saying I'm going to give up and just deal with the grassroots, but to be honest, I don't think I'm ever going to give up. I feel, because I hear priests, like in Boston just recently, there were 5 priests at the presentation. Some sit way in the back, some wear a mustache, but they don't want to be seen. Another issue I discovered was the issue of fear. There's a lot of fear in the church. But a number of priests have said to me that they're getting there, that they're thinking about it. And I think what could help is not giving up on them, trying to bring them. But having said that, Hans Kung just recently wrote this letter, and I've been hearing this among the women, reminding me that change will not come from the top down. This revolution in the church will come, as Hans Kung, and I know the women priests are saying this, and I see that. It's going to come from the bottom up, from the bossy, the grassroots up. It will never come from the oppressors, always from those oppressed. And so, but I see a lot of things happening today, I must say, and it'd be great if these priests and bishops can be a part of it. But if they choose not to be a part of it, I think they're going to start realizing they're really missing out on something that's very important.
From a Protestant point of view, we've got as many difficult problems as this one. If you just take a look at the evangelical domination of Protestantism in the United States, we have all kinds of reasons to be ashamed and not to take a front seat to anybody who's got other kind of problems. This discussion reminds me that I've heard it before. Over the course of history, I've heard it. People did not want to leave the church. But de facto, that's what happened. And I recall some 500 years ago, another religious man stood before his accusers and said, "My conscience is captive to the word of God. And to deny conscience neither right nor good, here I stand, I can do no other."
Well, just affiliating 500 years didn't change that church. That's my answer.
No, no, I don't think so. I think, as Jane said earlier, it's really necessary for people who identify as Catholic to stay in the Catholic Church and fight the fight, because that's the only way that we're going to see change happen. And I think that you're right, we're not going to see change overnight, but as Father Roy said, it starts from the bottom up. And so there need to be people who stay in the church and work towards change. So I can appreciate what you're saying, but no, I don't think so.
Father Roy, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for taking a stance out for women and their call to be ordained. I'm interested in, I have thoughts about, like, for the next Vatican Council. I don't know why I have a vision that there will be, that the next Vatican Council will be on the role of women in the church. And I don't know, I'm just thinking, I'm interested in any of your comments about it's going to happen, like with the Roman Catholic women priest movement and the grassroots movements. It's happening. The nuns on the bus, it's happening. So I'm just wondering if, in terms of your faith and also your hope, do you see that kind of a movement happening within the church in the next 50 years?
I just see that we talked about, often we hear the signs of the times. I mean, I look around, and the way I feel blessed because I travel so much, and I meet so many people who have left the church first. I mean, I understand that. I've come very close myself, and especially women friends who have simply said to me, Roy, I couldn't take it anymore. I was invisible. I wasn't accepted because of my sexual orientation. I hear from parents whose kids come back from college and say, Mom, how can you remain a Catholic in a church that's so anti-woman, anti-gay? I mean, how do you stay in? And I hear this from a lot of youth. But there's something going on that somehow keeps a lot of folks in, youth and older folks. I think they might see some of those signs of the times. I mean, when I entered Marino, way back in the 60s, we had over 300 preparing for the priesthood. Today we have 10. We have meetings every 7 years. We come back from, the countries we work in. Well, we can't wait that long. We're having an emergency meeting. The message is out. We are no longer in denial. We are dying. We are dying. What are we going to do? And I see this with other faith communities. A lot of death. You could see it. Pick up the NCR, what's going on in Vienna right now. They're consolidating. They're shutting down or consolidating, hundreds of churches. Something's got to give. And I do see, though, so many people who give me hope, who want reform, who give us hope because we're talking about a new model of church and not that model that's so top down, that's representing our church today, this, the Vatican, the hierarchy. That is very corrupt, as Hans Kung and my attorney and Canon Laurie and so many people see a lot of corruption. And we are working toward a new church. And what I hear, though, is this church that we know, has to die. It has to die, but from death, there will be a rebirth. There will be something that's really more about what this man Jesus talked about and what our loving God envisions for us. But this church that we know today is in big trouble. And I think it must die as we know it for this new church to be born.
Right up there. Hi, Dr. Roy.
I'd like to pick up on something.
Oh, sorry.
The question that we just had. I think the question that's often posed to us is, how can you remain a Catholic? The assumption is the Vatican is Catholicism. How can you remain under that? It never occurred to me to remain under that. In other words, we all got an idea some decades ago, which the Vatican actually authorized, although they didn't quite realize what they were doing, that the church is the people of God. And once we all got that, we had a place to stand in which to resist the Vatican.
Hi, Dr. Roy. It's very good that you came here today. And I come from the Caribbean and also from a very staunch Catholic family. And my mother, my parents gave their firstborn daughter and their firstborn son to the church. I being the first daughter, second child, was nominated to join the nunnery, and but that's a long story. I want to go there. My brother, the seminary. Okay, what I was going to ask you, all this stuff that you talked about, I know it's relevant, and I can identify with all what you said. What I was going to say is, why are the priests or those who are aware of what's happening right now in the church, why do they still have that perceived fear? Is it that they're afraid to lose their fathership? Less father, no father. The church has changed in the Caribbean, I agree. But so why are they still afraid not to talk about this issue like you are? What's keeping them? Is it the Vatican? Is it the Pope? What's keeping them? I mean, in the Caribbean, people are so open, but I still find that they are still resistant. What do you think? What can you make of that?
I'm asking the same question you're asking. Really, I'm baffled. I really, even some long-time friends are saying, Roy, I support you. I support the ordination of women. That's the issue. But I can't go public. I'm fearful. I'm not there yet. And now, I hear the word pension, but at the same time, and Tom Dorrell says this, and I've consulted civil lawyers and canon lawyers. They can't just strip you of your pension. And what I see, though, is, I think there's a risk involved. But my own opinion, the most difficult thing I had to deal with was my family. When in that clerical culture that we enter, and it's just very seductive. Seductive is the Vatican. When I was there last year with the women, we went there and protested and held banners, and I heard this from someone there in a briefing, how when you get assigned to the Vatican to study or as a job there, it can become very seductive, and before you know it, you're on this pedestal and people could relate to you in a different way. And I had to go to Louisiana. I'll never forget. That was the most difficult thing I had to do. And each priest will have to deal with their families who love them, who respect them, who are just so proud of you because you became a priest or a nun. And so I had to go to my very traditional Catholic family and called my sister and said, I'm coming home for the weekend. We got to have a family meeting. And when I got home, they got me aside, my siblings, 3 siblings, and said, don't do this, you're going to break Daddy's heart. But I know this about a lot of fellow priests. They're going to have to deal with their families. And the way it worked out in my case, I gave them the letter I sent to the Vatican, and my dad, actually my sister, I was hoping my siblings would bring my dad on board, you know, but they said, well, what do you think, Daddy? And he looked at me, read the letter, and he said, you know, I support Roy. He's doing the right thing. God took care of Roy in Vietnam, Bolivia, El Salvador, and he's going to take care of him now. And he got up, and he wept. He's very soft-hearted and loving, but he got up, gave me a big hug, and then my siblings all of a sudden join in. And then all of a sudden I saw how they changed. And my brother, Mr. Macho says, I want you to give me the address of that Pope. I want to write to him. But all of a sudden, parents, I've read this book years ago about the power of the blessing and curse, especially from family, loved ones, friends. And I and my fellow priests, we know we're going to have to deal with family, and we don't know the outcome, and with friends. And we could have a lot of people angry with us, and I think what it comes down to, we might not be secure enough. But what I do say to fellow priests, I'm starting to speak more frankly. I said, our silence, really, what does it matter? Our silence makes us enforcers. We are enforcers of the teaching. And but you bring up this question that I struggle with a lot.
Right up here.
This question is for any of the speakers this evening. You all spoke about remaining in the church and the importance of transforming the church from within. Do you have any thoughts for those of us that want to remain in the church and participate in the sacramental life of the church, how we can do that in a way that doesn't do violence to ourselves when we feel that violence is being done to us when we go every week and listen to what's being taught? And I just want to know your thoughts on that, what we could do. Thank you.
That's a very serious issue, and I fully appreciate what you've said. One of the most liberating things for me post-ordination was that the parish that gathered is a parish where I worshiped. And now I get to worship every week with a group of people who are not just committed to women's ordination, but committed to contemporary theology, to radically inclusive language, to the radical inclusivity of Jesus' message, to service, to what I believe are core gospel values. And I certainly could not tolerate a regular diet of canonical liturgy, which is thoroughly, entirely articulated in masculine images, symbols, pronouns, and words, all of which, the combination of which, imply the second-class status of me as a woman, and which indirectly promote the things we've talked about, domestic violence, sexual assault of women, and you hear Catholic men in the media today actually saying things like, Catholic men in the media saying, if a child is conceived in a rape, it's God's will. And, my mind immediately says, and how far are we from saying that rape is God's will? Because if the outcome of the rape is God's will, then is not rape God's will. The only thing I can suggest is that you try to gather a group of people around you to worship in a house church, or to create a woman church if that's where you're more comfortable right now. You can try to find, you can search your area for the possible existence of a Roman Catholic woman priest. But I can really appreciate why, if you can't find any of those things, you may still need a break from the sacramental life of the church, and just connect where and when and how you can, intermittently, until you can find a place where you can be who you are as woman and also who you are as Catholic. I wish it were easier than that.
Yes, this is more in response to the young woman that was just speaking. I've had the same problem in Los Angeles, but we now have a woman priest in LA. And another thing is too is we have groups to where sometimes when a woman priest is going to be in LA, she's here to visit family, or she's here to, for some conference or something, we'll get together and arrange to have a mass done. And on normal Sundays, I go to the church I grew up in. I don't go to church, but I go to Coffee and Donuts. So I get to the community of the people that I've known since I was like 8 years old. But at the same time, for the sacramental, if you're interested and you want to give me your name, or anybody else wants to give me your name, we do occasionally have, like Jane Vaya here did our first women's mass in Los Angeles that we helped organize. And we tried to do that a lot. I mean, sometimes we can go months without, but then somebody's here to visit for some reason, and immediately, okay, let's set up a time to get a house mass. So if anybody's interested, because I've found that that's what feeds me. I cannot step foot in the church that I grew up in, but I can go to Coffee and Donuts. And I co-chair the women's group, and I work the festival and things like that. I just can't go inside where the testosterone is just way too high. But, it's something that we worked on a lot here in Los Angeles, and I think it's helped a lot of people. Now that we have a woman in Long Beach that's going to be doing masses like on the beach at least once a month, then we've got that option too.
A brief comment from someone who still considers himself a new Catholic. We spent 5 months at my wife's grandfather's homestead place in Minnesota, and both of us demanded an audience with a local priest when he read a sermon from his bishop complaining about the bishop's lack of religious freedom in America. We had to have a conference with him about that, and talking to him and to others, he was sympathetic, very sympathetic with us, and he said, I confess, we need a leader. And it's my opinion that some of the other country priests there also had this opinion. I'm willing to support all the priests that are sympathetic to me who claim they need a leader, because someday that leader's going to show up.
Maybe just address that. While our church needs leaders, I really feel what's so important is for the movement to be advanced, to bring about this new model of church we envision, where there's real equality. We have to all get involved. And what I've learned I know in the SOA Watch movement for 22 years now, and other movements, civil rights movement, women's suffrage movement, what I've learned is that there were a lot of people doing a lot of things. And we can all do something and do it well. Now, what is that we can do? I know one thing, because I'm a great believer in grassroots organizing. That this revolution that Hans Kuhn talks about, and many of us envision, this movement. I mean, we've got to spread the word, and that's why I travel with resources. We have now the very first documentary made by Jules Hart. I know some of you have seen it, but it's Pink Smoke Over the Vatican. And it's just really well done. Jules took her inheritance and worked for 3 years on this. And the powerful voices of the women in the movement. It helps, I think, empower people. It wants people to do something. And the other is, for example, you want more info on the School of the Americas issue. There's our documentary here, School of Assassins, and a couple more compilation that helps. There's the one copy that I have, but you can order Rosemary's book, Catholic Does Not Equal the Vatican, that I've held on to for a couple of years now, that inspires. But this is hot off the press. I just felt it was more important, rather than travel with just my letter to the Vatican, to make it more, to talk more in depth about the issue and why I feel compelled, you know, as a priest for 40 years, to break my silence on this issue. And the people who really taught me to see this injustice and helped empower me to break the silence. And it's short, hot off the press, inexpensive, and I'm happy to say that we went into a second printing of, got rid of 5,000 just like that, but there's copies here of each of these resources. They make great gifts. Christmas is coming up, but also for, if you know a bishop, a priest, or, you know, really loved ones, family and friends, it's a great, very practical and important way to build the movement, to spread the word.
One last thing, just a commentary really. If you've been in Latin America, you know that in Latin America has one of the biggest populations of Catholics in the world, besides, I really don't think the Vatican has, you know, that many Catholics anymore. I mean, Rome, Italy. They say they're Catholics, but I don't really, when I went over there twice, I didn't see practicing Catholics like I see in the Caribbean and in Latin America. So I guess one of the idea I just had listening to you is how can this movement of reforming the Catholic Church challenge the Vatican, Pope Benedict, and you know about his writings and et cetera, et cetera. How can we make a dent in getting representation at the Vatican level with a grassroots movement? What do you think?
You know, people don't live their church life at the Vatican. They live it as a grassroots, and we're creating the alternative to the grassroots, which make it possible to live. And eventually, the Vatican will discover, well, although they haven't gotten it yet, that nobody's paying any attention to them.
So with that, help me.
Can I say one
Yeah.
more thing?
Oh, Gina.
I just want to mention really quickly, if you are interested in reading Father Roy's letter to the Maryknoll brothers about women's ordination, you can access that online at the Feminism and Religion blog. It's feminismandreligion.com. So you can go on there and read that letter if you're interested, and plenty of other information about women's ordination as well. Particularly some posts from Rosemary and from some of you who are in the audience I know have written about women's ordination on that site. So it's a good resource if you're interested.
So help me in thanking the panel, our guest speaker, for a great night, great discussion. Thank you.